Genesis chapter 19. In Genesis chapter 19, you have very good lessons to learn. This story was primarily the story of Lot. What happened to Lot is all you find here. See, the three men that had come to see Abram, and they had lunch with him in their house, and then the intercession for Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember last class we stopped it there, where two of them, they went to see Lot. Chapter 18 and verse 33. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left and Abraham returned home. So out of these three angels, one of them was the messenger and he left. So the other two people, they were angels. So angels can interpolate or take the form of a human and then revert back. They have that capability. You remember many times when you have seen somebody come and give you some strange message and they disappeared. Where did that person go? It's because that was an angel. Here, these two angels, they came and they arrived at verse 1. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. He was sitting at the gateway of the city. Now, when somebody sits at the gate, you know what it means? It means that man is a man of authority. He has the right, he has the authority to allow or disallow somebody from entering the city. It's like let's say the border patrol in the airports. See, when somebody from another country comes, what happens is you land at the airport and the first person you meet is the immigration officer. Now the immigration officer will determine whether you can be allowed inside or not. So tell me, is that authority? Yeah. And now Lot has now become a man of authority in this city. Remember, Lot chose in chapter 13 to go to Sodom because it looked like what? The Garden of Eden. And now this man has lived here for quite long, and now he is a man of authority. He's an alien there, but now he's got that big position. Okay, so the two angels came and met him there. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. See, even though he lived in a foreign country, he recognized these angels. He recognized these people. And then he paid obeisance to them. He honored them. And he wanted them to come to his house and stay. And they were reluctant. They said, we don't want to come to your house. We'll stay here in the square. But Lot said, no, you cannot stay here in the square. You need to come to my house. Okay, after they went to his house, he prepared good hospitality for them. We had a good time. And suddenly there was a knock on the door. And that knock was by the people who were the locals. They came and knocked the door and they wanted these two men to be brought out. You know for what? Because these people said, we want to have sex with these men. Now you must understand, we are talking about Sodom. Okay? Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is the kind of lifestyle. Can you imagine that? Somebody comes to a person's house and they just come and bang your door and then they say, what? We need to have sex with these people. Just let them out. And we'll look at what Lot said. Lot did not agree to that, and he said, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them to you, and you can do what you like with them, but don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. So, see the choices, the kind of choice that Lot made in chapter 13 is very crucial there. See where he has come to live here. Initially it looked like the Garden of Eden, but he is now in a society. In a very, very, very short time I'll show you another verse in the New Testament talking about Lot. So here he says, what did they say? Get out of our way. This fellow came here as an alien. See, now they are targeting Lot. They're targeting Lot. Verse 9. Get out of your way, they replied. And they said, this fellow came here as an alien, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. Because he was protecting these two men. So he was an alien, and these people said, we're going to treat you bad for that. Okay. What happened? These two men pulled Lot inside, and they had the authority, they had power. They had come from God. They were angels. So what did they do? They struck these men outside the door with blindness. The people outside the door became blind. Okay. Then what happened? They said to Lot, what? Do you have, verse 12, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. I made this comment in the last class. I want to make it again. The coming of these people, or these angels, the purpose was twofold. The first purpose was to bless Abraham, and the other purpose was to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. When the people will see Jesus Christ one day, one group of people will rejoice, and the other group of people will beat their breast. Same thing happened even in the time of the crucifixion. There were some people who were, though helpless, but they were at the cross. John was at the cross. His mom was at the cross. And there were some people who were totally the opposite. Okay? So please remember that whenever the Lord came, He always made a separation. Always made a separation. So here you find this. So verse 14. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. He wanted to go and help his sons-in-law. But when he said this, they thought he was joking. I want to ask you a question. Why do you think they thought he was joking? Whatever he said, was it good? Yes or no? Yes. Let me give you an example. I don't need to elaborate on this, just one statement. It's just like the clown in the circus going and telling the people in the village that there is a fire. Now, will people believe it? No. They saw a lot. They saw this man came from some other place. When he is in Sodom and suddenly he is turning a preacher, what do? You say, sorry sir, we don't believe you. We don't trust you. We think you're just joking. Okay, let us put it this way. If Abraham came and told this, would you think people would have believed? Probably. So before we say anything to the people, the most important thing is people look at you, who you are. Who you are will determine the way the people take your word. That's the most important thing even in ministry. Is it not? The most important thing is that you build up a trust with your congregation. If your congregation does not trust you, I think it's time that you move on. That's the most important thing people need to remember. Because if I don't trust you, I'm not going to listen to you even a single word. So here you find that his sons-in-law thought he was joking. They didn't care. Okay, that was to their peril. But the angels were urging Lot and said, hey, come on, we need to move. We need to move. You know what Lot was doing? Look at that, verse 15. With the coming of the dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." Verse 16. When he hesitated. Do you see that? When you know that the judgment is coming, you know what Lot is doing? He's still clinging on to his earthly possessions. He wants to stay back there. And what is God trying to do? Trying to get him out of that place. He's lingering there. He's dilly-dallying. He's wasting time. But because his heart is what? Stuck there. He's hesitating. You know what they did? These men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. What a great privilege that is. That when there is a danger coming, God sends somebody that he can hold your hand, pull you out of that place and take you to a place of safety. What a blessing that is. And that's exactly what you see here. Okay. And what did they say? There are 2 words. 2 times this word is used here. The word flee is used here. Flee. Verse 17. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives." What is fleeing? Is it pacing? Is it jogging? Run as if there is a cheetah behind you. Run as if you are being chased by a lion or a tiger. How would you run? Oh my goodness. Yeah? So you have to flee from this destruction. And see, the way God worked in all this situation is, though there is a judgment coming on Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot was a part of that, God provided a way for the escape of this man. Now you can also think about your lives. How God has protected you. Yesterday I was talking to a person from Phoenix. This man was telling me how he escaped death 3 times in his life. And he said, "I think God has a purpose. Why did he let me live even today?" So there is a purpose. 3 times he was in a dangerous situation. He took his dad's Jeep without telling him when he was a teenager. He took his dad's Jeep and then went to some hill, and then it was all foggy. He wanted to go to bathroom, though nobody was around, so he just parked the car and then went, and he was about to take the next step. He just paused there. You know where he was? At the edge of a cliff. And then he realized that God protected him. You have so many stories, is it not? You have so many stories that God protected you. You know, that's because, you know why he protected them? There's a beautiful statement there that we read. For he was merciful to them. Our God is a God of mercy. And that is why he protects you and me. I know the story of a man who was a doctor back home in India. And this man was supposed to take a bus and go to another city. He didn't have his reservation. But he thought he'll get into the bus and buy the ticket. He got and sat in the bus, and then he was about to buy the ticket, and the guy who had actually reserved that seat was following in the car from behind, and they stopped the bus and said, "Hey, you need to get me in." So they stopped the bus and this guy got in. So they had to let this doctor get out of the bus. The doctor got out of the bus. You know what happened? Within the next 15 minutes, that bus fell in a river and all of them died. And that doctor was saved because he didn't travel in that bus. You know, he's a Christian. He's a believer. He was telling us his testimony. The way God protected his people from the destruction. Look at hell. God protected you and me from that great destruction, hell, and provided a way. Our God is a Jehovah Jireh. And if you just sit with believers and talk to them one-on-one, you will hear ample stories how God is a merciful God. Okay, in this situation what happened is Lot said, "I cannot run to the mountains." The angel said, "You need to run to the mountains." Lot said, "I cannot run to the mountains. I'll be tired. Let's go into this village." And that village is called Zoar. Verse 22. It's called Zoar. Zoar means it's small. So they went into the village. You know what happened? Verse 23. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. I want you to think about this. How much time did it take for God to warn and send the judgment? Can you think about that? They got the warning at night, and next morning there was judgment. So don't you think they were supposed to flee? They were supposed to flee. See? So quick it is. They got the night. These people came in the evening. You look at the timeline. Chapter 19, verse 1. They came in the evening from Abraham. They met him at the gate. They went to his house at night, and they inquired if there is anybody in home who can come along with them. Nobody. At dawn, they started the journey. By the time the sun rose, what happened? Burning sulfur from heaven. The judgment was so quick. Was it really quick? No. God was watching it all the time. From the timeline of, the warning that Lot got, might be it looked quick, but it was not. God had been waiting patiently, and then He brought down burning sulfur. Archaeologists have evidence that in this part of this ancient world, they have found these sulfur remains to prove that this is true. There are so many people who contend the validity of several stories in the scripture. But archaeologists are people who have tried to find, or Christian archaeologists, who have tried to excavate those remains and prove that this is exactly true. So Sodom and Gomorrah incident is true. It happened. Okay? Alright. In all this case, even though God provided a provision, there was one big tragedy that happened. Verse 26. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Why did she become a pillar of salt? She looked back. You know what they were instructed? Don't look back. They were told, don't look back. And Lot's wife, she looked back. You find this warning about Lot's wife in Luke 17:32. In Luke 17:32 you have a warning, and you know who gave this warning? Do you know who gave this warning? Yeah? It's Jesus Christ Himself. If you see your Bible, if it's the words of Jesus are in red, you will find that is a red print. Luke 17:32. Remember Lot's wife. What is it telling you and me? See, when there is a fire and brimstone falling on Sodom and Gomorrah, this wife, see, the situation is, these people have been protected, led out of Sodom and Gomorrah, but her heart is where? Back in Sodom and Gomorrah. So many times, we may be physically out of that place, but our heart will be in the world. That's what God don't want. He doesn't want us to have our hearts in the world, be physically present here. Our teachers used to say in the school days, physically present, mentally absent. Yeah? You're physically present in the class, but you're mentally absent. What is the purpose of God? What is God's desire? God's desire is, this is the one word you can think, wholeheartedly. What God wants from you is that you be wholehearted. 100%. Be 100% for God. But Lot's wife was not that. She turned into a pillar of salt. Okay? Then what? Abram got up the next morning and he saw the smoke rising from the land. And what happened? It means Abram got the confirmation that what God had planned had come to pass. And verse 30, Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. They lived in a cave. Can you think about this man's journey? He chose to go to Sodom in chapter 13. And by chapter 19, he is a man of authority. The local denizens, that is local people, the citizens themselves said, what? You are an alien, now you are a man of authority. And now, in this situation, he had to run away into a small village. And now you know where Lot landed? Lot landed in a cave. Cave is a place where either, according to the tradition, you put the dead bodies. Abraham put his wife buried his wife in a cave. Or it could be a place for animals. This man of great authority, who had so much of property, who started his journey with Abraham, he landed in a cave. What a tragedy that was. That day he made a choice. You know, Abraham gave him a choice. Remember that? Abraham said, if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. Choice is yours. First, you get the choice. And Lot picked up that choice, looking at Sodom and said, wow, this is like Garden of Eden. Was it Garden of Eden? This world is also a deception just like that. It looks like, Garden of Eden to many people. But it's truly not. That's what the lesson we learn from. That's why Jesus said what? Enter through what gate? Narrow gate. Enter through the narrow gate. You know what happens is, this is how I picture it. People who walk through the wide gate, it funnels down like this. People who go through the narrow gate, it widens as you keep walking. So initially it looks like very constricted passage and you have to struggle to move in. Once you are inside, it's all an open ground. But when it's a wide gate, it all narrows down. Initially it looks good. Is sin not like that? Sin looks very, very nice initially, but later it kind of strangulates you. But the struggles that you go through as a believer and the struggle in this life, what happens? A great blessing and a great freedom is awaiting all those people who have taken this tough road. So that's what's happening there. Much worse than that is the story, the later part of Lot's life. These 2 girls, I really don't know why they got this stupid idea. They are not the only people on the earth. This is not the story of Noah. They could have got a husband. If they went into another part of the city or somewhere else, they could have got a husband. Why I'm telling you this is, we know the story here. These 2 girls got a stupid idea. And that idea was what? Let's make our dad get drunk and we'll have sex with our dad. The older girl did that. She went and told her younger sister and said, yeah, last night dad didn't even know that. The next night, the younger sister, and she also slept with her dad. And you know what? Both the girls were pregnant. That's incest. Incest. Both of them gave birth to 1 child each. And the first child, verse 36, so both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami, and he is the father of the Ammonites of today. Did you see that? And I want you to do some homework on the position of Moabites and Ammonites with respect to Israelites. I'll give you just one example. God didn't want the Israelites to do anything with these Moabites and Ammonites. Nothing. Who is Lot? Lot is Abraham's brother's son. But the Israelites will have nothing to do with the Moabites and Ammonites. Why? It all came out of incest. But if you look at, in a broad sense, the plan of God, it's wonderful. Okay? I don't want to go there. Alright, so this is what you find about Lot's life. The kind of decline of this man from such a huge position, from a big position, he just declined or fell away to the position of, falling into a cave. And then he didn't even know. His wife became a pillar of salt. And this man got drunk. And he gave birth to 2 children from his own daughters. What a tragedy that is. What a tragedy that is. This man walked out of his hometown along with Abraham. But look at what happened to him. Okay? Alright, chapter 20. In chapter 20 we find Abraham committing the same mistake that he committed in chapter 12. What was the mistake that he committed in chapter 12? In chapter 12 and verse 10, remember he went down to Egypt for a while. That's where they picked up Hagar, right? And this time you find verse 1. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of Negev. Negev means south. And lived between Kadesh and Shur for a while. Again, same thing. Again, he was here for a while. See, this is what we discussed last time. When you go to some place out of God's will, even for a while, you land in trouble. And this is what happened. Abimelech, king of Gerar, that is the province of Palestine, Philistines. Okay, that's the province of Philistines. So, obviously, this time he made the same mistake. What is that? He kept telling people, Sarah is my sister. Now, how old is she? Yeah? 89. An 89-year-old woman. And the king looks at her and says, I want this woman. 89 years old. I'm sure she was a beautiful woman. And then he called her, got word sent for her, and she was brought into his palace. She was brought into his palace. And what did he do? What did God do? Verse 4. Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, Lord, so what happened? Verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, you are as good as dead, because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman. Now, what did Abimelech do? He said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And didn't she also say, he is my brother? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands. One thing probably we might miss a point is, we are not supposed to miss this point. Think about this, brothers and sisters. God spoke to an unknown heathen king. God spoke to a heathen man. He is not an Israelite. He is the king of the Philistines. He spoke to a Philistine king. Many times you have seen that people always said, no, he had been speaking only to Abraham through it. No. Or was he dealing with only Israelites? No. God is a sovereign God. All the people, he says in one place, all the people belong to me. All the people. So he is a God for every nation. So here you find God is speaking to Abimelech. And Abimelech says, okay. Right? And he calls Abraham and says, verse 9. Abimelech called Abraham in and said, what have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should not be done. Who is this man? A heathen king. A Philistine. And what is he doing? He's rebuking a godly man. He's rebuking a man who is in the path of the promise. What a tragedy that is. Yeah? Lot's was a different kind of tragedy, but here is another kind of tragedy where a heathen man is rebuking a godly man. Today I saw on the Facebook and one of my friends' wall, it was written like this. He posted some video. Another lady commented on that, and this is the line she put in there. Being a Christian, how can you post such videos? Being a Christian, how can you post such videos? That's what she asked. I said, my goodness. It's a whip. It's a lash that makes you think twice. And that's from another Christian. But here is a story where an unbeliever is rebuking a godly man. Can you just imagine that? A man who's in the path of promise. That's a tragedy. Okay. Abraham replied, verse 11, I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Was it true? Was it true? No. Because Abimelech feared God, the king of Philistines, and a man from a heathen nation. He feared God. Isn't it interesting? Somebody to whom God appears first time in a dream and speaks to him, and he says, Lord, I am sorry. I will correct this mistake. And what does he do? He gives him gifts. He gives a lot of gifts to Abraham and says, hey, take all this. You know why I'm giving you all this? Verse 16, last part. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. So, in order to cover up the offense, he gave everything. What all he wanted to give to Abraham. Of course, by the time Abraham was a rich man, he didn't become rich because of him. Anyway, verse 17. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his slave girl, so that they could have children again. For the Lord had closed up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Abraham's wife Sarah. Did you see that? Because this Abimelech took Sarah to the palace, every womb in the palace was barren for that time. And God forgave the offense of King Abimelech. And that's why probably he says, that's the reason he says, verse 4, will you destroy an innocent nation? So because they dealt with Sarah, one person in a wrong way, the whole nation was getting the curse. You see what God can do? What God can do? If you touch one person, He can curse the whole nation for you. So that's how God works, okay? Chapter 21 is where you find the birth of Isaac. Isaac is born. And when he was born, they call him Isaac. Isaac means what? Laughter. Isaac means laughter. Verse 4. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him. Why? Because that's what God told him. He said, this is the way you need to do. This is the covenant that I'm making with you. Alright. Okay. And then what happened is, now Isaac and Ishmael are now growing together. Please don't forget that. Ishmael and Isaac are growing up together. Now by this time, when Isaac is born, Ishmael was a teenager. Ishmael was a teenager. Ishmael was born to Abraham when Abraham was what? 86 years old. Now at 100, Isaac was born. So he is surely more than 14 years. Okay? Now these two boys are growing up. Verse 8. The child grew and was weaned. On the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. Okay? Now, this boy is grown up now, so therefore, you can understand the age of these two boys. Now came the conflict. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham was mocking. So, who was mocking? Who was mocking? But Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abram was mocking. Why should she be mocking? Actually, it's a good thing if a child is born. But she was mocking it for what? Because of her age. Right? Because it's a promise from God. Now, that's why she said, God has made me a laughter. At this age, I have a child. And that's why they call him Isaac. So, when she was mocking, what did Sarah do? Called Abraham and said what? I need you to get rid of this girl. Do you think it was easy for Abraham? No. After all, Ishmael is his own son, is his own blood. But what did he do? He had to say amen to Sarah. Okay? Verse 11, the matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your maidservant. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also, because he is your offspring. So God certainly blessed Ishmael. But the next part of the story is very interesting. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, and they started walking in the desert. And how long will this water last? For some time. And now the water ran out. When the water ran out, what did the mom do? She didn't know what to do. And so she laid this boy under under the bush. Yeah. And she went off a bow shot away. And she said, I cannot watch my son dying. Now please remember, you're talking about a teenager. That's not a kid. It's a teenager here. Verse 17 is very important. God heard the boy crying. Did you see that? It's in a desert. It's in a place where there is nobody around. But God in heaven heard the cry of this boy. When Cain killed his brother Abel, there was nobody on the earth except 4 people. Now there are 3. Mom and dad don't know what happened. But the blood of Abel cried out to God. When you are lonely, when you cry out, let me encourage you, brothers and sisters. Even if nobody hears you, the God in heaven hears your prayers. He hears your cry. He's a God of heaven and earth. God heard this boy crying. I want you to just picture that in your imagination. It's a desert, far and wide, nobody around. It's a bush. Water ran out. Mom cannot see this boy dying. And this boy started crying. And the God in heaven heard that cry. Can somebody explain this to me? I cannot understand this. What did he do? And the angel of the Lord God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, and for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. You know what you understand from this? Even when you're lonely, when you're totally stricken, when you're totally down, God will make a way, do things impossible for you. How can there be a water in a desert which was not there until then? God opened her eyes and she saw, and there was oasis. There was water there. She filled it up and gave it to the son. You know why? You know why God did all this? Obviously God protected this boy. Why did he do that? Because he made a promise to Abraham. Our God is a God who keeps up the word, keeps up his promise. When he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, I tell you, believe it. you can stand by it. When he says, I will give you the right to sit on my throne, you need to believe it that one day you will sit with him on the throne. Our God is not a man who should lie. In Numbers it says, God is not a man that he should lie. He will not break his word. He'll keep up his word no matter what. No matter what. That's what we are taught in America, is it not? We teach the kids from their childhood. You need to keep up your promise. If you cannot do that, don't promise. You know where this concept comes from? The nature of God, who keeps up his word, whatever he says. There's another thing I want you to look at. Verse 20. God was with the boy as he grew up. Is it not interesting? God was with the boy. Because of Abraham, the first time when Hagar became pregnant and ran into the desert, there the angel appeared to Hagar in chapter 16 of Genesis. Again in chapter 21, after Isaac is born, when she is gone into the desert, God again sends an angel to their rescue. And now here you find a beautiful statement that says, God was with the boy as he grew up. He was with the boy as he grew up. It's a marvelous statement. When Jesus was born, what happened? When Jesus was born, what does it say? He grew up in the favor of God and man. So it's all because of his promise. Alright. And then he grew up and then he became a young man, got a girl to marry from which country? Why Egypt? His mama was from Egypt. His mama was, I don't know if Abraham went for the wedding or not, I don't know. Alright. Here you find Abimelech, the man who was going to face the judgment of God because of Sarah. He came to Abraham and made this statement. Please listen to this carefully. Verse 22. God is with you in everything you do. God is with you in everything you do. Please remember, the same person, the same king, comes to Isaac and says the same thing again in chapter 26. In chapter 26, in verse 28, he says what? We saw clearly that the Lord was with you. It's so interesting, this place Gerar, or the Philistines, king of the Philistines. There's something interesting what happened. The strategy that Abraham played to protect his wife and himself, actually himself. And what did he say? She's my wife, right? Please remember this. Isaac played the same trick. Isaac played the same trick in chapter 26. He played the same trick with the same people. And you find Abraham got this great certificate which says, God is with you in everything you do. Who is giving this statement? A heathen. See? Bible says, when your ways are pleasing unto God, He will even make your enemies to live at peace with you. This person Abimelech was the same man who rebuked Abraham. Yes or no? In chapter 20 and verse 9. He's the same man who rebuked Abraham. But now the same man comes and says, hey, I can see that God is with you. I have a question for us. The question is this. Has anybody who is a non-Christian said this to you? You're a man of God. You're a woman of God. Has anybody said that? Believers and believers patting the back is different. You pat my back, I pat your back. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. That's different. You know what is greater? If an unbeliever, an unsaved person comes and says, there's something different in you. There's something different. You know, that's Not looking for certificates from people, but that talks about volumes about a person. When somebody can walk up to you and say, I can see God is with you. Let's make this our desire, that Lord, we want to live a life where people can look at us. And that's how you exemplify Christ to the people. That's how people can see Christ in you. Christ in me. That's very important there. And these people make a treaty, and then they dig a well there. That's called Beersheba. All right. And in chapter 22, it's a very, very powerful story. Chapter 22 is where we all know where Isaac was to be sacrificed. I want to go slow. I love this passage. I love this chapter. I want you to travel with me, and we're going to study some great truths from this. Now, at this point of time, God came to Abraham and said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. Okay? Now please remember that by this time, Abraham is now becoming a loner, an all-alone person. The way he came out of his land in chapter 11 of Genesis, he came out with his dad, his nephew, his wife, and he came to chapter 12. He received the promise from God. They picked up a girl from Egypt called Hagar, and in chapter 13, he got separated from Lot. And then you find by the time you come to chapter 16, he has a son called Ishmael through Hagar. And now as you travel down the lane, now in chapter 21, by chapter 19, Lot is separated from Abram already. In chapter 21, you find Hagar is gone, Ishmael is gone, and God tells this man, you know what? Pick up your son, your only son, and offer him as a sacrifice to me, as a burnt offering to me. Please remember, there is a reason why I gave you this story backdrop. Okay? And look at the verse 3, verse 2. One of the mountains I will tell you. One of the mountains I will tell you. Which mountain, Lord? I'll tell you when it comes there. Where, Lord? I'll tell you where it is. But that's in the land of Moriah. In Moriah there are mountains. I'll tell you, but you need to start doing that. What did he do? Verse 3. Early the next morning, you know what I would do as a father? I'd probably negotiate with God. Lord, can we do, Lord, is it really your will? Are you really sure you want me to offer my son? Abraham has gone through real difficult days in his life. He began as a man of no faith almost. Very little faith. Remember when God told him that he's going to give him his son? He didn't believe it. When God said, I'm going to give you the land, he didn't believe it. God said, I am your reward. He said, so what? I don't have a son. When God said, I will give you a son, he said, is it really possible? His wife doubted him, doubted God. And then in this journey you find this man. He comes to a point where God says, your only son, you have to offer sacrifice. Abraham is ready, woken up the next morning. And we miss some details in the scripture. We really miss some details. Look at in verse 3. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. You know what? He cut the wood himself. Abraham, when he was cutting each branch, each wooden log, he knew why he was doing that. Is it not a painful thing to do that? He cut the wood himself and loaded upon the donkey, and then they all started off. Verse 4. On the third day. Please don't imagine that it's a kind of a movie where you see this man, God appears in the dream and tells him, oh, you need to go and offer sacrifice. And next day, early morning, next morning they started moving, and then you cut the scene and then you're at the mountain. No. It's a 3-day journey. It's 3 days and nights. And you know what interesting thing is? He didn't tell his wife. He didn't tell his wife. If you really do not know the story in the later part, you would imagine that this man would come back alone. Abraham would come back alone. And when Sarah says, where's my son? And Abraham probably would have had to say what? I offered him as a sacrifice. What do you think would be Sarah's reaction? See? Are you crazy? This was the son who God gave, and you offered him as sacrifice? And on the light note, she would say, no more. No more child, okay? At 89, at 90, I gave birth to a child. That itself is a big trouble. Probably Abraham thought over all this and did not tell his wife. Did he know that he was going to come back with his son? No. When God told him, he did not know what the future lay for him. But he said what? I will do what God told me to. Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, verse 5, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over. We will worship and then we will come back to you. You know what? Please remember, the way the offering, what Abraham was going to do. What was Abraham asked to do? Offer his son as a burnt offering. Okay? Offer his son as a burnt offering. And Abraham calls that... Okay, let me back up. Now the son is not an ordinary son. Bible itself says he is the only son and the son whom he loved. And the only person now with him is who? His son. He's lost his dad, he's lost his nephew, he's lost his other wife, Hagar, he lost his son Ishmael, his wife Sarah is at least a 3-day journey away, and now here is on the mountain, and he's telling his servants what? I'm going to worship God. What did God ask him to do? Offer something that he loved the most. Did you get it? Offer to God as a burnt offering that he loved the most. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? That is the definition of worship. Worship is not raising your hands on a Sunday morning for 15 minutes and singing in a loud voice and going back home and forgetting everything. Do we need to do that? Yeah, we need to do that. But worship is laying up on the altar the most important thing, most important aspect of your life that you love the most is worship. Abraham is offering his son. He's the only son. He loves him very much. Verse 7, verse 9. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar. He laid Isaac on the altar, and that is the definition of worship for Abraham. What's your definition for worship? What do you think is worship? Look at this man. He is giving us a new dimension to what worship means. Okay, verse 6. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So who is carrying wood? Okay, Isaac. Who is carrying the knife and fire? Abraham. Please remember there is a symbolic meaning to this. Okay? Please remember the symbolic meaning. Alright? We'll come to that part. And then there's a conversation where son asks, Dad, we have everything, but where's the lamb? There's wood, there's fire, there's knife. Where is the lamb? What is Abraham's answer? God will provide. I think, that question must have shaken him up. All this while, maybe while cutting the wood, it was all his imagination. But now when the son asks this question, okay, let's try to understand the ages of these two people. Now, by the time Isaac was taken to the mountain, he was not a kid. Alright? Now this man, let me put it this way. He's at least 30 years old. Now there is a 30-year-old man and there is a 130 plus man. Now Abraham bound up his son. Do you think it happened by force? Or was it because of the voluntary willingness of the younger boy? It has to be voluntary willingness of the young person. I put it like this. When dad took the fire, he laid the wood, probably laid the wood, and then called his boy and said, Isaac, come here. What, Dad? I'm going to tie you up and lay you on the altar. I'm like, what? No, I'm going home, okay? I'm running off. So, if he had run off, tell me, could Abraham have caught him? No. Please remember, Isaac was willing. He was willing to be offered. There's a lesson we are going to learn from this, okay? And then, verse 10. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. When he took the knife, he was about to slay the son. He heard a voice. The angel of the Lord called to him and said, Abraham, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Verse 12, do not lay a hand on the boy. He said, do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. What does it mean? What does it mean? Your worship has been accepted. Abraham, your worship is accepted. Okay, let's look at some important lessons. We paused at a place and said, who was carrying the wood? Isaac was carrying the wood. Father was carrying the knife and the fire. You know why it happened this way? Isaac is a symbol of Jesus Christ. And Abraham is symbol of God. He had the judgment of knife and fire in his hand. And Jesus carried the cross. And he was willing to die for the mankind. And Jesus did not die a forced death. He died a willing death. Willingly he went to the cross. He willingly went to the cross and died for us. Let me tell you one more thing. This place called Moriah, mountain of Moriah, you know where it is? In 2 Samuel, you find David made a mistake. The mistake he committed was, he counted his army. When he counted his army, God said, you should not have done this. Because you did this, I'm going to punish you. And because of this, I give you 3 options. Do you want 3-year famine? Or do you want 3 months of fleeing like you were used to? Or 3 days of plague? What do you want? David said, Lord, I cannot run away now. I cannot tolerate 3-year famine, so give me 3 days plague. So he chose that punishment. So God sent that plague for 3 days. This plague started all over Israel. But this plague came and stopped at a place. You know what that place is? That is the threshing floor of a man called Araunah. That's the threshing floor of a man called Araunah. You know why it stopped there? You find this in 2 Samuel chapter 24. Chapter 24 and verse 16. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, and the Lord was grieved because of the calamity, and sent to the angel who was afflicting the people, "Enough, withdraw your hand." The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. It stopped at the threshing floor of Araunah. You know why it stopped at the threshing floor of Araunah? Do you know that why? Somebody has an idea? This is the same place. This is the same place where Isaac was symbolically sacrificed. It's in the same place again in 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. Then Solomon began to build the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David. It was on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, the place provided by David. Do you see the connection? Mount Moriah, Abraham went and offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice. That's the same place where the plague stopped. David bought that place with a price, gave that land to Solomon and said, "Build the temple here." You know why the plague didn't come on that? Here is the meaning. The sacrifice of Jesus Christ is enough for any kind of a plague. The sacrifice offered by Abraham in the form of Isaac was enough to cover up every other disease or a plague. That's the reason why it stopped there. That's the reason why it stopped there. Now let's look at verse 12. He says, "Do not lay a hand on the boy." Now he said, "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God." You see the word now? When is he talking about? When he took the knife and was about to slay. Now my question is this. When he started out early in the morning the next day itself, why didn't God stop him there? Is it not? When he was chopping the wood, why didn't God stop him there? When the servants asked him a question, why didn't God stop him? When the boy asked him a question, asked dad a question, why didn't God stop him? God waited and waited for that time when the knife came out. What happened? God provided a ram. My dear brothers and sisters, please listen to this carefully. God had already provided a ram in that thicket when Abraham started from his house. You really don't know what God has prepared for you and me. I've been asking you to pray for me. I asked God whether I should go ahead with that, whatever we were praying for, and God has said no to me. He has said no to me. So therefore, I will not take that step. You know why? Because I know that God, whenever He takes me through a place, He will provide a ram for me even before I start from my house. And that's what... Did Abraham know that there would be a ram? No. Was there a ram? Sure it was. You really do not know the provisions and the plan of God. What we need to do is take... Don Brington's wife was telling him, it seems, take one day at a time. Take one day at a time. I think that's what we need to do in our life. What a great lesson. I learned that lesson when I went to their house yesterday. Naomi was telling, and Don Brington said, my wife told me to take one day at a time. I'm going to take one day at a time. Brothers and sisters, let's live our life of faith one day at a time. We need not know what's on the yonder, but if we walk by faith, we know the one who is leading us knows where He's taking us. That's what happened here. The ram was there, it caught in a thicket. They pulled that out, and then what? Offered it as a sacrifice. Jehovah Jireh. I'm sure God was directing this ram. Put your leg here, put your horn here, yeah, and then probably it got stuck. And if he had voice to talk to God and said, God, what are you trying to do me? Hey, no, don't worry. There will be a guy called Abraham will come and pick you up. Don't worry about that. Okay? You'll be offered as a sacrifice to me, so don't worry. So God has control over. See, we today learned that God even spoke to people who were not even Israelites. He spoke to king of Philistines. He spoke to Hagar. He was with the boy Ishmael. Our God is a sovereign God. And in, I think we'll finish the last part of this 22. I wanted to finish 23, but what you find in 23 is only the death of Sarah. But chapter 22, 15, you say, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham for a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. You know what is important there? Because you have obeyed me, I will do all this for you. You know, the interesting part is this. We really never know when God is going to test us. That's the tricky part. But whenever God tests you, if you're faithful, you will see the blessings. Not only He, but because of Him, He said, all nations will be blessed because of you. Okay? Let's take this small part. Chapter 23, verse 1. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. I'll talk about this later. In the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. So when she was 127, she died. Okay? She was 127, she died. And he went to the Hittites and then bought that land. And that's the verse 19. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, which is at Hebron in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. Didn't we see about the cave? You know, that's where the dead body was buried. So he bought it for 400 shekels of silver from the Hittites. And that's what happened there in chapter 23. So I would pray that you may go through this once again, study this, and may God teach you some more new lessons from this portion from 19 to 23. In the next class we will study chapter 24, a very, very complex chapter, and it's got great truths in it. Okay? So we'll continue this in the next class.